Hello and welcome to Talking Defense, RAFAEL's defense magazine. Every program will be dedicated to a different subject with all relevant experts, data and aspects here in the studio and from around the world. Today, Fire Weaver. With me in the studio is Brigadier General Shmuel Olanski, Vice President and Head of Innovation Program Center at RAFAEL, and from the US joins us Lieutenant General Joseph Anderson, President and CEO of RSGS. Thank you both gentlemen for joining me today. Mr. Olanski, what is exactly Fire Weaver?
Fire Weaver is a system of, that brings new capabilities for the world. We decided to start to develop Fire Weaver when we understood that in the world that our fighters are dealing with today, they need to communicate and to close loops between sensor and shooters in seconds. And we learned from the last arenas that we operate in that the communication today, the common language between the tanks, the infantry, the Air Force is so negative that it takes seconds and a lot of time to close those loops. And we understand that in the asymmetric fighting that we have today, most of the enemies that we are engaging have a very short appearance and they shoot the missile, they bomb the IED, and go back to be in the middle of an urban population area. So we need to make sure that we detect the target very fast and we close the loop very accurate and very safety that we will not hit uninvolved people.
But what exactly you bring into that, integrate into that system? Because you call it the next generation combat vehicle technologies, whereas it's currently here. Yes,
actually we already demonstrate a Fire Weaver with active units of the IDF. But when you want to understand what we brought to this system, we brought maybe 70 years of legacy development of RAFAEL. We bought first the great capability of computerized vision. Fire Weaver and the next generation vehicles capabilities are based on a common language that coming from a technology that we called match guide, which match the live vision of the user with 2D or 3D maps. So now the common language that I spoke before about between the infantry, the tanks, the Air Force, is now everybody is having the same common language of the same 3D model, no matter where he looks at the arena in matters of shallow angles and apps. The other things that we are bringing is great knowledge about AI. Today, the data that runs between the players allow us to manipulate new capabilities, bring new capabilities that based on AI capabilities that developed for years in RAFAEL. And by this option, we helping the commanders, we support the commanders and the user to have a quick decisions. What will be the most effective way to close the loop between the sensor and the shooter?
Mr. Anderson, thank you so much for joining us from the US today. What are the biggest challenges that, looking from the US Army, but not only, every westernized army is facing today, and how those technologies can assist them?
Yeah, thank you. The biggest challenges, or we call them capability gaps, are all based on our adversaries now being on a near peer scale. You are now talking about long-range precision fires, you're talking about ballistic missile defense, you're talking about networks. All these things are much more complicated in a much more lethal, sophisticated, multi-domain battlefield, which expands just beyond land, air, and sea. It also expands into the space and cyber. So the complexity, the lethality, the use of robotics, machine learning, autonomous intelligence, artificial intelligence, all these things are happening at a much greater scale and speed. And those are the gaps we have to close, which is much different than fighting a counterinsurgency fight.
Take me to the field. If you were a commander in Iraq or in Afghanistan or anywhere else and you get such a system, how would it change your life?
It'll change our life tremendously. It goes back to what Shmuel was talking about. Clearance of fires has become, from a fratricide perspective to harming civilians, et cetera, a much more complicated battlefield. And as we're talking here in the videos about the urban environment. So the speed to actually engage a target and reduce that sensor to shooter time is critical. That's supposed to be a 30-second or less process. As commanders have gotten back from Iraq and Afghanistan and trying to work places like in Eastern Europe, it's taking them hours to clear fire. So what FIREWEAVER will do, and it is futuristic here in the United States, as we figure out what platforms, what systems do we integrate on the system, but the speed of decision-making and the time on target for us will be significantly enhanced through this technology.
Mr. Olanski, does it work? Is it operational already?
It's not operational yet, but we already, as I said before, demonstrated in the field. We took operation unit of the IDF and we let them operate a maneuver exercise over urban terrain and to see what will be the effects of the system. We were very proud of the AAR that they have after this exercise. What we learned first is the common language between the commanders and the users of the weapon. They were able to close the loops in seconds, which is a time that we were not used for. It makes all the maneuver much more faster. The battalion finished his mission in third time that other battalions did the same mission without the system. The other things that we learned from this demonstration is that the confidence that the commanders felt to allow to shoot a high level of fires into the village and support fire to the platoon commanders in the streets, they felt much more confidence that the situation awareness of the commanders is much better and they can make it safe enough that they will not have a force-to-force incident and will not attack uninvolved people in the village. The third thing that we learned is that the information and the data flow was very effective. Everybody gets only the information that he needs. And all the procedures that we used to do in the command post by a lot of officers and paperwork were done automatically by the computers in the back of the command post. So it happened much faster. And the third thing, we learned that the decision in the end, what weapon system is the most effective to the specific target, that we will use a fly for a fly, an elephant for an elephant, in matters of ammunition economy was much better. So we feel that we bring new capabilities to the maneuver.
So it was already sold to the IDF. You grew up in the field. You've been commanding for nearly 3 decades in the field. At the end of the day, on one hand is the mission, on the other hand is saving or protecting your soldier's life. Balance the two?
I think that the good thing about the new capabilities that we bring today to the battalion level, to the joint capabilities, to the next generation vehicle, which are part of this system, is that we actually reduce the need to make this balance, because you can be very effective on the mission on one hand, and on the other hand, it brings a lot of safety to the procedures that are done. So now the commander can feel much more comfortable to make sure that he used the support fire very close to the forces and make it much more effective. He can use a variety of capabilities that he didn't feel safe enough to bring them to the next 10 or 100 meters from the forces. So it's make the mission much faster and effective, and on the other hand, make it much more safety and economically. So that's what we bring.
Shmuel Olanski here in Tel Aviv, General Joseph Anderson in the US. Thank you very much both for joining me today. And that's all from us today. We'll be back shortly with another edition of Talking Defense. Until then, stay safe and stay tuned. Bye-bye.